It was supposed to be the end, a quiet funeral, a grieving wife, and a world mourning the loss of a good man. Emma Caldwell had buried her husband with a heart full of sorrow, convinced that the love of her life was gone forever. But just as silence settled over the grave, a voice broke through the rain. "Your husband is alive," said a poor boy no one had noticed before. What followed was a journey of hope, courage, and the unshakable power of a single truth spoken by a child the world had overlooked. This is the story of how a broken heart found its way back because one boy believed in miracles. Rain fell gently over the cemetery, a soft drizzle that blurred the outlines of gravestones and umbrellas. People in dark coats murmured condolences as they began to drift away, their shoes sinking slightly into the wet grass. Emma Caldwell stood alone at the edge of the fresh grave, unmoving, as though rooted in place. Her eyes, hollow from days of sleepless mourning, were fixed on the name engraved into the polished marble. Daniel James Caldwell, beloved husband, philanthropist, friend to all. The wind picked up, rustling the black veil over her face. She didn't notice. The world around her had grown silent. For Emma, time had stopped the moment she received the call. A car crash, deep in a remote village where Daniel had gone to oversee a school project. The locals found a body, his wallet still in the pocket, his clothes nearly burned beyond recognition. The medical team confirmed it. She had buried her soulmate today as the last of the guests departed and the sound of tires faded into the distance. Emma took a step forward and slowly knelt beside the grave, letting her hand rest on the damp soil. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "I don't know how to live without you." She didn't see the boy until he was just a few feet away. His voice was soft but clear, cutting through the hush like a spark. "Miss ... your husband is alive." Emma turned her head sharply. Standing there in the rain was a thin boy, more than 10 barefoot, with torn pants and a shirt that clung to his bony frame. He was soaked, shivering, but his eyes held something strange. Certainty. "What did you say?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "I saw him," the boy said. "He saved me." Emma blinked, stunned. She looked around, expecting someone to come retrieve him, thinking maybe he was confused, or worse, trying to scam her. But no one came. The boy pulled something from his pocket, wrapped in cloth. He unfolded it carefully to reveal a broken silver watch. Emma gasped. The face was cracked, but inside was a tiny, water-damaged photo, her wedding photo. Her hand trembled as she reached for it. "He gave this to me," the boy said quietly, "before he told me to run." Inside the quiet warmth of the shelter, Emma sat across from the boy at a wooden table worn smooth by time and use. A small heater hummed beside them, and the aroma of warm soup filled the room. Louise, now wrapped in a dry, oversized hoodie, cupped the bowl in both hands, blowing gently before taking small sips. He kept glancing up at Emma, unsure if she believed him. She watched him closely, her mind racing with doubt, confusion, and the tiniest glimmer of hope that terrified her to feel. "Tell me everything," she said softly. "From the beginning." Louis nodded slowly, lowering the bowl. "It was raining hard. I was on the road, walking alone. A car was coming fast, but then it crashed down a hill. I ran over to help." He paused, eyes narrowing as he searched for the right words. "There was a man. He had blood on his head and he couldn't move one leg, but he smiled at me. He said his name was Daniel." Emma's breath caught. "He asked if there were other kids nearby," Louise continued. "I told him yes, in the village, so he told me to help him get there. I helped him walk. It took hours, but we made it." Louise leaned forward now, his voice stronger. "He stayed with us for many days. He gave us food from his bag. He fixed the roof when the wind blew it off. And when the mountains started to shake, he pulled me out before the ground opened. He told me to run and find someone, that people would be looking for him. He gave me this." Louise pointed at the watch now in Emma's lap. "He said you would know, that you would believe me." Emma gripped the photo again, her mind screamed that this couldn't be true. The authorities had recovered a body. The coroner had confirmed it. She'd seen the clothes herself, but no one ever found Daniel's face. Only his wallet, a watch that wasn't his, and a man burned beyond recognition. "How far is your village?" she asked suddenly. Louise looked up. "Far. But I remember every turn." Emma stood. Her voice trembled, but her eyes burned with new purpose. "Then take me there, right now." The helicopter lifted off just after sunrise, its blades slicing through the morning fog as it soared over hills and valleys still dripping from last night's rain. Emma sat inside, strapped in tightly, her hands clenched around the broken watch. Louise sat beside her, nervous but determined, pointing out landmarks to the pilot as they flew deeper into unfamiliar terrain. A small rescue team accompanied them, equipped with medical supplies and survival gear. No one spoke much. The air inside the chopper was thick with tension, hope, and disbelief. Below them, the landscape grew wild and dense. Narrow rivers twisted like silver ribbons through thick forest. Roads vanished, giving way to steep ridges and scattered clusters of huts barely visible beneath the green. The area Luis described was marked as inaccessible, too remote for vehicles, and far from any modern aid station. It was where Daniel's jeep had been found weeks earlier, overturned near a collapsed bridge. Everyone had assumed the worst. "We're close," Luis said over the headset, his voice crackling. "That river bend, I remember, we walked along it for a long time." The pilot circled lower, searching for a flat area to land. After a few tense moments, they found a clearing near a footpath and touched down. The team disembarked quickly, Luis leading the way with surprising certainty. Emma followed, heart pounding in her chest, every step laced with fear and hope. The jungle closed in around them. Branches slapped against their legs, roots snaked across the path, and the sounds of insects and birds echoed through the trees. After nearly 2 hours of hiking uphill, Luis stopped. "This way," he said, pointing toward a slope hidden behind a curtain of vines. They climbed carefully, and just as exhaustion began to set in, a shout came from one of the team members up ahead. "Over here, someone's here." Emma pushed forward, branches scratching her arms, until she stumbled into a small, hand-built shelter made of palm leaves, branches, and scraps of tin. Inside, lying motionless on a pile of blankets, was a thin man with a beard and sunburnt skin. His arms were wrapped around a bundle of folded paper maps, children's drawings, and a piece of fabric from his torn shirt. Emma's knees buckled. "Daniel," she whispered, his eyelids fluttered. Daniel's eyes opened slowly, blinking against the light filtering through the trees. For a moment, he seemed confused, disoriented, unsure if what he saw was real. Emma knelt beside him, her hands gently cupping his face, tears pouring freely down her cheeks. She had imagined this moment so many times, but nothing could have prepared her for the reality of it. He was thinner, bruised, sunburned, and clearly weak, but it was him, her, Daniel, alive. He blinked again, his cracked lips parting. "Emma," he rasped, barely audible. She nodded, unable to speak, choking on a sob as she pressed her forehead to his. "You're here," she whispered. "You're alive. I didn't think. I thought you'd never find me," he murmured. His voice trembled with both relief and disbelief. "How did you know?" Emma reached into her pocket and pulled out the broken watch. She showed him the tiny, damp photo still tucked behind the glass. "Luis," she said, "the boy you helped. He found me at your funeral. He told me you saved him. He remembered everything." Daniel's eyes welled with tears. "I gave him the watch. I didn't think it would make it." "You gave him hope," she said, brushing his matted hair back, "and he gave it back to me." Medics moved in gently, checking his vitals and starting for fluids. Daniel winced in pain as they tended to his injured leg, but his eyes never left Emma's. They held each other's gaze as if afraid to blink and lose it all again. She held his hand tightly, grounding them both in the reality of the moment. Later, in the rescue helicopter, Emma sat beside him as they flew toward the nearest hospital. Luis sat across from them, wrapped in a blanket, watching quietly. Daniel turned his head toward him and smiled faintly. "You made it," Daniel said to him. "I was so afraid you wouldn't." Luis smiled back shyly, nodding. "You told me to run, so I did. I found her." Emma looked at the boy, then at her husband, and finally out the window at the vast world below. Against all odds, love, courage, and the words of a small, brave child had brought her family back together. Months later, the sun shone brightly over a newly built center nestled just outside the city, its name etched in stone above the gate. "Read the Luis Foundation." Children laughed in the courtyard, their voices echoing with joy as they played, painted, and learned. Inside the main building, warm light filled the rooms where orphaned and displaced children received care, education, and the chance to dream again. Emma walked down the hallway, her steps slow but content, a sense of purpose now anchoring every breath she took. Daniel, walking beside her with a slight limp from his healing leg, held a stack of children's drawings, gifts from kids who now had a future. They paused at one of the classrooms where Luis, now in clean clothes and a neatly combed haircut, sat at a desk practicing reading. He looked up and waved shyly when he saw them. Emma smiled. "He's adjusting so well." Daniel nodded. "He saved my life, Emma. Without him, I would have died out there. But more than that, He reminded me that even the smallest voice can carry the greatest truth." The story of how a young orphan boy told a grieving millionaire that her husband was alive had spread across the country and beyond. News outlets had covered it, but it wasn't the fame or attention that mattered to Emma and Daniel. It was the flood of letters, support, and donations that poured in proof that people still believed in miracles, kindness, and the power of humanity. Luis now had a home, not just with the Caldwells, but in their hearts. He had been adopted not out of pity, but out of a deep bond forged through courage and love. He often told the other kids that sometimes, even when no one believes you, telling the truth is the bravest thing you can do. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Emma stood on the foundation's rooftop with Daniel and Luis beside her. She looked out at the glowing lights of the village below and took a deep breath. "Do you think this would have happened?" she asked, "if I hadn't stopped to listen to him?" Daniel shook his head gently. "Sometimes the smallest voice changes everything." They stood there in silence, a family born not just of blood, but of hope, resilience, and the miracle of being found. And so, what began as a day of heartbreak turned into a journey of faith, courage, and unexpected miracles. A grieving widow, a lost boy, and a man who refused to give up. Each played a part in rewriting a story that could have ended in sorrow. In a world that often rushes past the unheard and the unseen, one small voice made the difference. Because sometimes the greatest truths come from the least expected heart sand. The simple act of listening can bring the lost back home. Let this story remind us all, hope is never truly buried, and love has a way of finding its way back.